There we go. was going to say, just going to make sure audio is coming through okay. Hope everyone's doing well. We're going to have a big show, a fun one. I want it to be a good. We got a lot to get into. There's just a lot going on. We got a very busy world right now. Let's see. And my phone's not wanting to cooperate with an audio check. I got to check the audio. I would hate for you guys to not be able to hear me very well. So we're going to do a quick audio check. All right. Audio appears to be coming through well on YouTube. Quick audio check on Rumble. Hey, everybody. Some of y'all are joining. All right. Audio. People on Rumble. Audio is working good. I love people on Rumble. I like Rumble so much more than I like YouTube. Rumble is so much more on our side than YouTube is. YouTube loves to censor stuff. Gotten strikes on YouTube before for saying basic stuff, really. Nothing really that boundary pushing. Want to remind everybody that you can go over to StreamYard, and I'm going to put that banner up. I still have the stream starting soon one. We got a lot to get into. We're going to begin, as we always do, with our passage of the week. I'll read that passage, then we're going to have the monologue. I'll talk for a little while. Then we're going to do the usual, which is take a look at the headlines. So what do we have for our passage of the week? Passage of the week is in Colossians. Colossians 3:15 to 17. Let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also ye are called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms, in hymns, in spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. And whatsoever ye do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God and the Father by him. We live in a very troubled, dark world. Anything that you can do to contribute to peace is good. We need that. We need a little bit more peace and love in the world. But love not like the world loves, but as God loves. There are times God uses his staff to discipline his sheep. There are times that this loving Father loves the world so much that evil cannot remain unpunished. To the world, they like to make the memes about, oh, would a loving God really flood the earth? Yes, a perfectly loving and also perfectly just God would, because he loved the good people and he wanted to punish and needed to punish the bad. Whenever the good are punished for doing their good and the evil are rewarded for doing their evil, that is where things are so backwards, you've got to have something step in and stop it. And God has before, and he will again. Want to remind all of you that peace is very important, and also make sure that whatever you're doing, as it says in the passage of the week, in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus. It's important to remember. All right, now let's get into the monologue. We live in a very divided time. The right is going through a lot right now. It feels like on the right, you're either someone who is very, very principled and frequently banned off YouTube and sometimes even banned on X, having a hard time getting your feet under you, or you're a MAGA, we'll just use the term, sloppulist, however it's pronounced, account with 3 or 4 million followers, and you don't really know your left hand from your right. And some of those people, these big influencer types on X or on Facebook or what have you, are good people. Do not misunderstand. Some of them are fine. I just want people overall, especially Zoomers, but also people in my generation. I'm Y, Gen Y, so I'm technically a millennial, barely, to move to the right. And some of these accounts on X are doing that. It's incremental. It's just a little bit at a time, but they are trying to move everybody to the right, and good. We need a whole lot more of that. So I want to begin by saying that that's almost the two different camps, but over time that's going to change. Over time, people are going to come to our side, and this is not a popularity contest of, well, who can get the most followers? It's about winning. And whoever has the most followers right now is not going to always have the most support, the most followers. So that's an important thing to remember. There's a lot of stuff that's going on right now. I'll include this in the monologue quickly. Trump met with Putin up in Alaska. I'm going to talk for a while about the war in Ukraine in general, what all I think about it, but also going to talk about the Supreme Court. Kim Davis has presented a case. It is to be viewed by the Supreme Court. We also have some other separate Supreme Court cases. I also wanted to look at a headline where Kristi Noem said 1.6 million illegals have left. They were here, they self-deported, they remigrated. Also, there is talk of 4,000 soldiers that were deployed in Latin America to fight the cartels. I'm going to talk to you guys about that and why I'm opposed to it, importantly. But also, I will steelman the upshot. I will steelman the other side and talk about why some conservatives, some right-wingers are going along with the idea of troops leaving this country or our bases around the world. Not a ton of them, not abandoning their stations, but a certain amount are being deployed, most likely leaving, in some cases, it was the Army, hard to say, but I know there's a lot of Marines in Parris Island, South Carolina. This could have been Fort Bragg in North Carolina, which is near towards me. These soldiers, 4,000 of them, have been deployed to fight cartels in a country that is not the United States. So we'll be talking about that shortly. Also, news about Beto O'Rourke, 2 stories, really, that I will be getting to later. We're going to begin with my thoughts on the war in Ukraine real quickly and this summit. So before I even read the headlines to you, this should be pretty clear that I've not been a big cheerleader for this war. I was one of Trump's cheerleaders in the sense of he said he was going to do things, take action to try to put an end to this war. Has he done it? Has he tried? He has tried. He has not done it. He has not actually successfully brought an end to this war, but it's not really for lack of trying. Some of this is Zelensky's fault. Some of this is probably Putin's fault as well. I'm going to read some headlines to you soon about this, and I would guess that eventually, as Ukrainian soldiers continue to die, Zelensky will get the ball rolling eventually. He will say, okay, we're tired of dying out here. We want more support from America than we're getting. It may be that Donald Trump does send some aid their way. That would be a betrayal of his base. That would be the opposite of what he said he was going to do. And I mentioned the sloppulous sort of like accounts on X. They're still going to and clap, 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 right? These people who really have no scruples. It's just Trump always right. And Sean Hannity frequently talks to the president, I'm sure, and he will go on Fox News and yell and scream about how Putin is a dictator and how it's great that Trump is finally showing him who's boss. It's like, well, if he does, that would be the same way that Biden, quote, showed Putin who was boss too, because it's the same behavior, sending military arms to Ukraine. And so I will give Trump a lot of grief if he does send more aid to Ukraine. I am not team always Trump. I'm also not team never Trump. There's a lot of people on the right that have turned sour against Trump. I have an interview coming out soon where I had an RX enthusiast back on, and there's a lot of good things that Trump has done, and we talked about some of them there. I'm not going to make this episode all about Trump doing good things. It'll instead be about some of the important headlines I've mentioned. But the point is that this war has been going on for far too long. It's very possible that what Trump says is true, that Putin saw the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan and thought, well, if Biden's going to do stupid stuff like that, he's probably not going to do a whole lot if I invade Ukraine. But the thing is, I don't know, because if that's the case, it seems to be a miscalculation. We have not gotten into a hot war with Russia, but it has been not only a cold war with Russia, but a proxy war where we have sent billions of dollars in both money and in weapons to Ukraine and in economic aid, foreign aid, so forth and so on. And so that seems like, if we're going to use this whole thing like, we use with Trump, 4D chess, Sounds like Putin's chess move back in 2022 did not play off very well. He's kind of putting himself in a very, very long, difficult stalemate. Now, is Russia losing the war? No, overall, they're winning the war, but they're losing a lot of soldiers as well, and time, money, and resources. And so they're going to eventually want to come to the table too. So that's an important thing worth noting. Now, if I had to guess, and I'll talk a little bit after I read some headlines about what I think is going to happen. I want to remind you guys, this is the monologue portion. I will soon not only be doing things with the monologue, but also read your chats later because I want to hear your thoughts. But if I had to guess what is going to end up happening with this war between America and Russia, really is what it is, with Ukraine caught in the middle, most likely what I think will happen is eventually Putin will come to the table because Zelensky comes to the table first. And then Trump will broker some kind of a deal in which neither one fully gets what they want, but the war will be done for, I would say at the least the war will be done for 10 years. It might even, the ceasefire might break sooner than that. But I would say the war will probably be paused for 10, 20 years, and then eventually Russia's either going to decide they want more, or someone in Ukraine is going to do something stupid and Putin will move back in. It could be because, Ukraine has conducted bombings of their own civilians in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, people that refused to speak the Ukrainian language and they wanted to speak Russian, and also voted in a way that Ukraine didn't want. They voted to join Russia, which of course Zelensky and his predecessor did not like. So that's the upshot. It's the big 5,000-foot view of what I'm going to be covering. The military-industrial complex is really doing their best to get their hooks into Trump. I didn't even mean to read this, but I think that I'm going to. There's a really interesting article. I'm going to find it real quick and read it to you. Let me see if I can find it, but I'm sorry, excuse me. There's an article written by the Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin, who has been called Putin's brain in the sense that, he's smarter than Putin, or he does a lot of Putin's thinking for him. Not sure how much that's true. He's the philosopher guy that actually helps Putin do what he wants to do. He kind of gives the theory behind it all. And so some people don't like Alexander Dugin. I find him to be an extremely intelligent man. But he wrote an article recently that I really wanted to read out loud. MAGA, GOP, and Trump is the title of this article. The Last Battle for Sovereignty. Let me see if I can quickly screen share it. By the way, if things all of a sudden, if quality gets worse because of it, let me know. But I'm going to at least briefly show you the headline. So here is the article, MAGA, GOP, and Trump, The Last Battle for Sovereignty, and that is by Alexander Dugin. I'll hide it back again. I'm going to read it a little bit. Not the whole thing, but some. I will say, Dugin seems to really view MAGA as being a whole lot more anti-war than I do. I view MAGA as, in a lot of ways, a bunch of grandmas with Walmart flags, as Razorfist like to say. But he views it as a little bit more of a congruent movement against war and hardcore on the border. Definitely hardcore on the border. And old MAGA was. 2016 MAGA definitely was. But I think MAGA has evolved over time. MAGA is really important political and ideological phenomenon. And the grammar is not always going to be the best because this is probably originally in Russian but been translated. It was essential in Trump's victory. But Trump is compromised, so yeah, bad grammar, between GOP and MAGA. Trump, driven by MAGA, has won elections, but afterwards passed to GOP with its neocon core. GOP neocons want Trump to abandon MAGA irreversibly and become neocon. I presume that infights in MAGA are instrumentalized and somehow provoked by the GOP. So now we have three units. Neocon GOP, MAGA in full disarray, and individual Trump, so Trump himself, posing as sovereign dictator on the top of both. In fact, MAGA is a third party symmetric to the uniparty of deep state, meaning the neocons, the globalists, and radically opposed to it. So you've got the uniparty of the deep state on the one side, is what he's saying when he says symmetric. That's the deep state and the uniparty on one side. Then on the other side, you've got MAGA, diametrically, radically opposed to it. The different figures of MAGA now fight each other. So uniparty is dismantling MAGA as a serious threat that gained huge influence. Vance is regarded as the second chance to repeat Trump's move, compromise between MAGA and GOP, but GOP neocons now feels itself too powerful to tolerate Vance. Vance is most likely to be the key person in MAGA instead of being as well severely criticized by frustrated MAGA. Okay, so that is some of what he wrote. And again, he really Dugan overall views MAGA as being a little bit more congruent. I really view MAGA as starting to become the establishment because, for example, Lara Trump is now a leader in the Republican Party. You can't say that MAGA, the organization started by Trump, is no longer part of the Republican Party. It is, because someone in the Trump family, who's probably taking orders from her father-in-law, meaning Donald Trump, taking these orders, she's running the Republican Party with Michael Whatley. They're co-chairs of the Republican Party, right? So as a result, MAGA is split. There's those like Sean Hannity who calls himself a Ronald Reagan, what's the other term? Maybe like a compassionate or No Child Left Behind. And then also an America First or Make America Great Again conservative. That's what Hannity called himself. He's no more America First than the man in the moon. He's completely against America First. He is all about the neocon and the neoconservative welfare and warfare state. Sean Hannity loves all that. He's very establishment. So does Ben Shapiro, by the way. I mean, I'm not going to leave him out of this. But the point that I'm making is that MAGA is moving into the GOP establishment, except for people like Bannon, except for people like Tucker Carlson. If you want to call someone like Nick Fuentes, the Groypers, part of the MAGA movement, they're also not part of the establishment or part of the GOP either. I don't really refer to Fuentes as the Groypers, but they're a little bit hard to ignore because of the fact that a lot of young people are in that movement. But I view them as sort of being a bit of a fringe group, not that mainstream. But they're growing because of the influence on Instagram in particular. But with the point being that MAGA is very fractured, which is something that Dugan does say. He says that MAGA is in full disarray, right? So with all that being said, there's just a lot going on with that. And we're now going to look at, speaking of, I mentioned Trump a second ago and Putin, what all is being said. We have an article, our first story before I even go to Trump and Putin. A Hispanic woman tried to call the cops on a white woman and her child and file a hate crime report. The offense that this was phoned in, this hate crime, to tell the story, this woman was extremely, extremely sad because she was standing behind a woman in line. Evidently, they were at a Walmart. The white woman and her child were talking about the boy's birthday party. This Hispanic woman overheard the boy say, "Mommy, I would like to have an alien-themed birthday party." And the mom, very confused, said, "Why, honey? Your birthday's not on Cinco de Mayo." And this Hispanic woman was infuriated and tried to call this into the cops. And that is from totallynotnonsense.com. That's my source for that one. Okay, so we're now going to get to our first real story. That was a joke for those of you who are a little bit slow. Kentucky clerk still fighting. That's a little later. I accidentally clicked on the wrong thing. Flub. I had to have a Bidenism or what's his name? Fetterman, since I'm a tall guy. I messed up kind of like Fetterman. Hello, everybody. Good night. That's what Fetterman says. All I need is a goatee and a hoodie. Zelensky says Trump pursuing Ukraine ceasefire at Putin's summit. So, in other words, Zelensky is saying, well, Trump wants a ceasefire on Ukraine's side. He doesn't really care about what's going on with Russia. That's how he's phrasing this. And I'll read about some specifics about some of the claims that were made. But yeah, it's Zelensky is not on anyone's side except himself. Even the side of the Ukrainian people, if you want to make the argument that he cares about Ukraine, I got to disagree with you. Because Zelensky is getting money from this Ukraine aid. He doesn't care about his country. If he did, you want to know how I know he doesn't? Because if he did, then he would have already had a deal. There would be a deal. And as a result, he doesn't really care because it's all about the money in his pockets. That's what matters to him. This article is from NPC. Zelensky, Trump's pursuing Ukraine ceasefire. From NPC, Zelensky, Trump pursuing Ukraine ceasefire. This is written the 13th. So, in other words, he wants Ukraine to have a ceasefire. European leaders met virtually with President Trump on Wednesday, urging him to press Russian President Vladimir Putin for a ceasefire and security guarantees for Ukraine before any peace talks begin. The Trump-Putin meeting is set for Friday in Alaska without Ukraine's president at the table. At a joint news conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Berlin, Ukrainian President Volodymyr, however it's pronounced, Zelensky said Trump agreed that Russia must commit to those terms before negotiations start. Merz said Europe, NATO, and Trump were in broad agreement on next steps, including rejecting legal recognition of Russian-occupied territory. Merz warned that Europe's security and democracy are at stake. You can just hear the dramatic music playing in the background. If Russia's invasion goes unchallenged, saying Putin could target other nations if allowed to keep land taken by force. This strategy is based on supporting Ukraine and putting pressure on Russia. So if in Alaska there is no movement on the Russian side, then the U.S. and the Europeans need to increase the pressure. Speaking later at the Kennedy Center in Washington, Trump called the meeting friendly and rated it a 10. He said there's a very good chance of a follow-up summit with Putin and Zelensky almost immediately if Friday's talks go well. But he also warned that very severe consequences await Russia if there's no ceasefire deal. So what are those very severe consequences is the question. Still, Trump acknowledged he doesn't believe he can stop Putin from targeting civilians, casting doubt on the chances for a quick truce. I've had a lot of good conversations with him. Then I go home and I see that a rocket hitting a nursing home or a rocket hitting an apartment building, and people are laying dead in the streets. So I guess the answer to that is no, because I've had this conversation. And that was from Trump. Putin now controls nearly 20% of Ukraine, including Crimea and most of four eastern regions. He's demanding that Ukraine withdraw from remaining territory there and abandon plans to join NATO. Demands Kyiv call unconstitutional and unacceptable. So we have that article from NPC. We also have, highlights. I have some highlights to read you real quick. I don't want to go on to this too much. Of Putin's statement after this summit with Trump. So what all was said at the meeting? Let's get some highlights of things Putin said. This article looks like was written yesterday. Following are key quotes from Russian President Vladimir Putin's statement after meeting President Donald Trump in Alaska on Friday. Before I read that, I want to remind everybody to like this on Rumble. Please like this. Please like it on YouTube as well. Retweet it if you're watching on X. Would really appreciate that. It helps the algorithm. As it is known, Russian-American summits have not been held for more than 4 years. This is a long time. The past period was very difficult for bilateral reasons, and let's be honest, they have slid to the lowest point since the Cold War. And this is not good for our countries or the world as a whole. Obviously, sooner or later, it was necessary to correct the situation to move from confrontation to dialogue. And in this regard, a personal meeting of the heads of the two states was really overdue. So that was something that Putin said. As you well know and understand, one of the central issues has become the situation around Ukraine. We see the desire of the U.S. administration and President Trump personally to facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict, his desire to delve into the essence and understand its origins. I have said more than once that for Russia, the events in Ukraine are associated with fundamental threats to our national security. Moreover, we have always considered and consider, meaning they consider now, the Ukrainian people. I have said this many times, brotherly, no matter how strange this may sound in today's conditions. We have the same roots in everything that is happening for us is a tragedy and a great pain. Therefore, our country is sincerely interested in putting an end to this. But at the same time, we are convinced that in order for the Ukrainian settlement to be sustainable and long-term, all the root causes of the crisis must be eliminated. That's a quote from Putin. All of Russia's legitimate concerns must be taken into account, and a fair balance in the security sphere in Europe and the world as a whole must be restored. I agree with President Trump. He spoke about this today, that Ukraine's security must without a doubt be ensured. We're ready to work on this, said Putin. I would like to hope that the understanding we have reached will allow us to get closer to that goal and open the way to peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kyiv and the European capitals will perceive all of this in a constructive manner and will not create any obstacles. That they will not attempt to disrupt the emerging progress through provocation or behind the scenes intrigue. And again, those are quotes from Vladimir Putin. Another article that I'm not going to bother with reading because we're already 30 minutes in. Trump and Putin conclude the talks on Ukraine, touting progress but no breakthrough. As of now, folks, there is not a peace deal. Now, one intel officer said Putin is seeking to break Ukraine's will but avoid a NATO war. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, Russia does not want a hot war with NATO. That would not be good because NATO has nuclear weapons just like he does. So Putin does not want to escalate to that point. So that was one. Now, this was interesting. At one point, I will read a little bit of this article. Sounds like Putin at one point did talk to Trump about having a follow-up meeting in Moscow. President Donald Trump, this is on Newsmax, signaled caution Friday when Russian President Vladimir Putin suggested holding their next meeting in Moscow, saying the idea could bring political heat but might still be possible. The exchange occurred in a joint press conference at Joint Base Elmendorf, I think is how you say that, Richardson, following narrow format negotiations between the two leaders. The event began about an hour earlier than scheduled and closed without taking questions from reporters. So again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you again and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir, Trump said at the conclusion of the press conference. Next time in Moscow, Putin responded. Trump replied, oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat of that one, but I could see it possibly happening. The discussions between Trump and Putin touched on both regional security and economic cooperation. According to Russian media reports, Putin said, Ukraine's security must be ensured and we are ready to work on it. I will say, though, even though a deal has not been struck, at least they're talking. And that's a good thing. Biden wouldn't even be trying to meet with Putin. That's one thing that Tucker Carlson talked about when he interviewed Putin. As Putin said, no, there's been no talks. I mean, there's been talks through other countries that have talked to the United States, but Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris have not talked to the officials in the Russian government about a peace. And that was back when Biden was still president, which is a big deal because it's like, well, you would think they'd be trying to get some kind of a peace deal done. But no, it looks cooler to not do that. Excuse me. It looks cooler to not do it. It looks cooler to just kind of be like, yeah, we're big and strong. And by big and strong, we're rich and we're going to just send millions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, which is not true. We're actually not rich. We're pretty broke. We're in a lot of debt. That's just one reason why it's bad. Okay, so as usual, those sources are going to be on thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Want to remind you guys that you can go there. That's an important place to go. thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Go there and you can become a paid supporter. You can also get episodes earlier. And you're watching this live right now. You get to see and watch the recording. After this, it's going to all be on audio. But you can go on Substack and watch the videos if video is your preference. Okay, that's one new feature I'm doing now. So now we're going to continue with another story. This one is probably just as, if not more interesting than what we just covered. I've been looking forward to reading this a lot. Newsmax, Kentucky clerk still fighting same-sex marriage ruling. What is going on with this? Her name is Kim Davis. The Kentucky County Clerk, who became known around the world for her opposition to the U.S. Supreme Court's 2015 ruling that legalized same-sex marriage, is still arguing in court that it should be overturned. Kim Davis became a cultural lightning rod 10 years ago, bringing national media and conservative religious leaders to eastern Kentucky. I keep yawning. I didn't get enough sleep last night, sorry. Eastern Kentucky, she continued for weeks to deny the licenses. So even after Overfell, she was still like, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm standing by my convictions. She later met Pope Francis in Rome and was parodied on Saturday Night Live. Of course, Saturday Night Live did that. They're bull crap. Unfunny. They didn't used to be, but they are now. Davis began denying marriage licenses to same-sex couples after the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in Overfeller v. Hodges on June 26, 2015. Videos of a same-sex couple argued with Davis in the clerk's office over their denial of a license drew national attention to her office. She defied court orders to issue the licenses until a federal judge jailed her for contempt of court in September 2015. Davis was released after her staff issued the licenses on her behalf, but removed her name from the form. The Kentucky legislature later enacted a law removing the names of all county clerks from state marriage licenses. Davis said her faith forbade her from what she saw as an endorsement of same-sex marriage. Faith leaders and conservative political figures, including former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee and then Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin, rallied to her cause. After her release from jail, Davis addressed the media, saying that issuing same-sex marriage licenses would be conflicting with God's definition of marriage as a union between one man and one woman. This would be an act of disobedience to my God. Davis declined a request for an interview from the Associated Press for this story. No wonder Kim Davis didn't want to talk to the Associated Press. Has anyone been paying attention to that? The Associated Press is garbage. They are libs just like most of the other mainstream media. So that's not really a surprise. In 2018, one of the men who had confronted Davis over her defiance ran for her office. David Ermold said he believed people in Rowan County were sick of Davis and wanted to move on. When he went to file his papers for the Democratic primary, Davis, a Republican, was there in her capacity as clerk to sign him up. Sitting across a desk from each other, the cordial meeting contrasted the first time they met 3 years earlier. That's funny. Both candidates lost, Ermold in the primary and Davis in the general election. She has not returned to politics. Davis's lawyers are attempting again to get her case before the Supreme Court after the High Court declined to hear an appeal from her in 2020. So it's not that they ruled no, they declined to even read or hear an appeal from her. Well, now they're trying to do it again. And that was in 2020. And so in 2020, depending on when it was brought up, it was probably before Amy Coney Barrett was in. Now that Amy Coney Barrett is in and they're not having to deal with both that and also the Supreme Court may have been looking at stuff regarding the 2020 election, it could be a different situation. Excuse me. I cannot stop yawning. I should have drank an energy drink or something. I had coffee, but it wasn't enough. A federal judge has ordered Davis to pay a total of $360,000 in damages and attorney's fees to Ermold and his partner. Davis lost a bid in March to have her appeal of that ruling heard by a federal appeals court, but she will appeal again to the Supreme Court. Her attorney, Matt Staver of the Liberty Counsel, M-A-T, not M-A-T-T, said the goal is to affirm Davis's constitutional rights and overturn Overfell. So that was on Newsmax, but reposted from the Associated Press. Want to hear your thoughts. What do you think is going to happen with the Supreme Court, and what do you think should happen? Want to hear your thoughts. Now, also, we have a source from SCOTUS blog basically saying the same thing. Will the Supreme Court revisit its ruling on same-sex marriage? On SCOTUS blog by Amy however it's pronounced. In 2015, shortly after the Supreme Court recognized a constitutional right to same-sex marriage in Overfeller v. Hodges, a local county clerk from Kentucky made national headlines when she refused on religious grounds to issue a marriage license to a gay couple, David Moore and David Ermold. Both named David. That's weird. Kind of like Dave Rubin and David, whatever his name is, his so-called husband. That clerk, Kim Davis, is back in the news again this summer. This time because she has asked the justices to overturn their 2015 decision. Although as a statistical matter, Davis may face tough odds on convincing the Supreme Court to grant review, the real question is whether there are 4 votes to revisit Overfell and 5 to overrule it. In 2015, Davis was the clerk of Rowan County, Kentucky. Her job description included using licenses, such as marriage licenses, to county residents. After the Supreme Court's decision in Overfell, Kentucky's governor at the time, Steve Beshear, sent a letter to the clerks in all of the state's counties, directing them to license and recognize the marriages of same-sex couples. So Kentucky's governor at the time of this did send a letter to the clerks to license and recognize the marriages. So the former governor that stood by her was not, obviously being a former governor, he wasn't in power. I read that article from Associated Press and made it sound like that guy was in office, but no. Steve Beshear was Kentucky's governor at the time, and no, he stood with the Obama administration vis-a-vis the Supreme Court again. Because why? The Supreme Court justices did what they did because it was politically expedient at the time. There is no part of the Constitution, there is no part of law in our nation pre-2015 to say that it needed to be nationally recognized. If anything, they could have decided for that case and said, okay, that's how that one case goes, but that's not the standard for the entire nation. Why? Because of the 10th Amendment. If it's not a power enumerated in the Constitution, if it's not enumerated to the executive or to Congress, it should go first to the states, then to the people. That's the Constitution, 10th Amendment, folks. Although a county attorney told Davis that she would be required to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, Davis opted instead to stop issuing marriage licenses to anyone gay or straight. While this moratorium was in effect, Davis refused to issue a marriage license to Moore and Ermold. She told the couple she was acting under God's authority and they could get a marriage license in a different county. So she told them, I'm not just saying no, I'm saying not here. I refuse to, but you can go to a different county and do it there. But they ended up turning it into a big deal, and it was Overfell v. Hodges. And that should not have been ruled that way. Now, something I want to say before I talk about some other cases the Supreme Court has done and other court cases, because in a lot of ways, the legal system in this country is kind of screwed. But there's a lot of Republicans, and I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. So say something in the live chat, or if you're watching this on the archive, comment. Some of you are going to be watching this on Spotify, listening to this on Spotify, or you got YouTube pulled up and you're watching the podcast episode where there's no video, but it's just the audio. Comment. I want to hear your thoughts. There's a decent amount of Republicans who are saying, don't do it, Supreme Court, because if you do, there's going to be a backlash in 2026, and the House and Senate are not going to be red. We need to have a red House and Senate, or it's going to be just so bad. Well, hate to break it to you, but if the economy doesn't get better, the House and Senate are probably going to be gone anyway. That's A. And B, I think a lot of people, especially people my age and younger, are very tired of the argument to do what is politically expedient, because if we don't, it's going to cause us some kind of discomfort or pain in the future. There's a lot of us who are saying, no, we need to use power against the left. And if that means the Supreme Court putting their foot all the way to the floor, giving this Trump train, some gas, so be it. We're tired because we've lost and lost and lost. We lost in 2015 with Overfell. We lost in 2012 with the re-election of Obama. We lost in 2008 with the first election of Obama. And you can make the argument we lost in 2004 and 2000 as well with the election of Bush, both in the primary and then in 04, the general, because he was an incumbent at that point. Real right-wingers have not had one of their own in since probably Calvin Coolidge. There's not been a real right-winger in there. Nixon was okay. Reagan was not completely bad. Reagan had his faults, but he also had his upside. Nixon was better than Reagan in a lot of ways, the more I read about Nixon. And that's the thing. That's very politically unpopular, especially with the older generation who's been told ever since they were a kid, Nixon bad, Watergate. Nixon bad, Watergate. But when you actually do research, you know there's more to the story. So I wanted to read to you about that. Let's now, before we go to commercial break, a quick one. It's only going to be a fast one. Let me now go to this. I want to look at some other Supreme Court cases, some other court cases that have happened so that we can look at it together. High Court upholds Mississippi social media age verification law. So this was interesting. I'm going to read it to you. When, how, if it loads. The Supreme Court on Thursday, it's funny how the article says High Court. It's the highest court. Supreme Court on Thursday refused for now to block enforcement. So block enforcement, don't get it twisted, of a Mississippi law aimed at regulating the use of social media by children, an issue of growing national concern. Well, that's good. Feels like almost no one's talking about this. At least Mississippi is talking about it. I don't know if I even agree with how the law is being implemented, but some law needs to be on the books regarding this, and then what I'm about to read you about Texas. The justices rejected an emergency appeal from a tech industry group, NetChoice, that is challenging laws passed in Mississippi and other states that require social media users to verify their age. The court had been asked to keep the law on hold while the lawsuit plays out. So basically, there's a lawsuit going on. This case said, all right, just don't allow them to enforce it right now. Let the lawsuit go through. Then they can enforce it depending on how the lawsuit goes. There were no noted dissents from the brief, unsigned order. But Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote to say that NetChoice could eventually succeed in showing that the law is indeed unconstitutional. So based on how they phrased the Supreme Court, it is unconstitutional. But Kavanaugh, he's only one of them. But he has said it's possible the argument can be made that age verification law in Mississippi is unconstitutional. Kavanaugh then, he nevertheless said he agreed with the court's decision because the tech group had not shown it would suffer legal harm if the measure went into full effect as the lawsuit unfolded. NetChoice argues that the Mississippi law threatens privacy rights and unconstitutionally restricts the free expression of users of all ages. A federal judge agreed and prevented the 2024 law from taking effect. But a 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals ruled in July that the law could be enforced while the lawsuit proceeds. It's the latest legal development as court challenges play out against similar laws in states across the country. Parents and even some teenagers are growing increasingly concerned about the effects of social media use on young people. Supporters of the new laws have said they are needed to help curb the explosive use of social media among young people and what researchers say is an associated increase in depression and anxiety. There's problems with social media. I will just tell you. I know that the more time I spend on social media, the less I like it, which is why I take breaks. On Sunday, I do almost no social media. I might do 2 posts, look at 1 or 2 things, and that's about it. I restrict on Sundays as much as I can. And during the week, there's even times where I'm like, man, I've been on Twitter way too long, or X way too long. And some of it is hard because it's a tool I got to use to reach you. But everyone needs breaks, and especially for really young people. I'm 27, for like a 17-year-old or a 13-year-old. They really are just all addicted to it, a lot of them. And as a result, there's some arguments being made that we need to do something to help children and parents as well. Because especially if it's leading to anxiety and depression, that's really bad. Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Fitch told the justices that age verification could help protect young people from sexual abuse, trafficking, physical violence, sextortion, so like sexual extortion, I guess, and more. Activities that Fitch noted are not protected by the First Amendment. That's a good point. It's not. Trafficking and physical violence, sextortion, and sexual abuse are definitely not protected by the First Amendment. And for those of you who want to say, well, somehow porn is protected by the First Amendment, you're really, really dumb. I mean, you're just completely an idiot. NetChoice represents some of the country's most high-profile technological companies, including Google, which owns YouTube, Snap Inc., the parent company of Snapchat, and Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram. NetChoice has filed similar lawsuits in Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, and Utah. So that was an interesting article regarding social media. There's another article that I have. Where did it go? Texas. Court allows Texas law on age verification for pornography sites. So it looks like it's also the Supreme Court. Let me read it. In a major First Amendment decision, the Supreme Court on Friday upheld a ruling by a federal appeals court that allowed Texas to enforce a state law requiring pornography sites to verify the age of their users before providing access. By a vote of 6-3, the justices ruled that the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit should have used a more stringent standard of review, known as intermediate scrutiny, to determine whether the Texas law passes constitutional muster. But as Justice Clarence Thomas wrote for the majority, the Texas law passes that test. The power to require age verification is within a state's authority to prevent children from accessing sexually explicit content. Again, the 10th Amendment is part of our Bill of Rights. there should be basically 50 experiments going on in this country. This state does this way, this state does it that way. And if you don't like it, you can vote, you can get involved in politics. There's ways you can get involved and change things in your state, in your municipality, so forth and so on. The 10th Amendment is on the books and it's important. So this age verification is a pretty good way of doing it, because I don't want a 12 or 14-year-old on the internet. Heck, there's people that are younger than that, like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, who are looking at porn. And an age verification law may force them into not being able to use it. Now, some of them going to grab dad's driver's license and do something that they shouldn't do. Yeah. But we should never use that argument to say, well, we should just let anybody look at porn. Well, if they're going to look at it illegally anyway, we might as well just let them look at porn. That's a really dumb argument. We don't say that about hiring a hitman or murder. We don't say that about but laws are for people that follow things the legal way. Criminals are going to break the law, so do we really have to prosecute theft? That's California's argument, right? Pornography is evil. It damages the brain. It damages the soul. Our studies talking about how it damages the brain. It is a drug, and as a result, there should be laws on the books regarding verifying and making sure. If we're going to card people going to an alcohol store or whatever, liquor store, card them and look at their ID and make sure. There should be some kind of an age verification for other crap online. And again, I want all that crap online to be banned, but at least this move in Texas is a step in the direction of protecting children. Ultimately, I want all pornography banned, and I think a lot of right-wingers are with me on that. Because again, like I said just a second ago, show me in the Constitution where you have the right to abortion, but also the right to pornography, where your freedom of speech is that was what was in mind. Your right to make porn is what the founders had in mind when they made the First Amendment. Bull crap, nonsense. And it's evil and wrong, and these men knew that it was important, imperative for this nation to have Christian values, and pornography goes completely against Christian values. So although the law should go further than this Texas law, at least they're trying to protect children, and I take my hat off to them for that. And I also take my hat off to the Supreme Court trying to protect children. So that is a good thing. Very glad to have seen that happen. Okay, now a couple other big stories to read. I got a little bit longer with you here on Saturday than I usually do during the week. Usually during the week I only go 45 minutes, and I'm already at 52, thereabouts. So we have an article, another one that I want to read to you, about Kristi Noem, something that she said, and nothing bad or controversial. Some pretty good news, actually, when you think about it. About 1.6 people have left, people that came to the country illegally. News that 1.6 million illegal immigrants have left is massive. But I want to just say, before we do that, we're going to have a quick commercial break. Don't go away. I will be right back. Folks, I'm sure that there are many of you who are tired of big con. These people that are on the mainstream media who call themselves conservatives, but don't ever actually fight back against the left. And in fact, all they do is surrender. And whenever they do exactly what the left wants, they will then put a big label on it of, oh, well, this is actually conservative, to let millions of people into the country and call it amnesty because we've legalized them. Dumb arguments like that. If you're tired of losing, if you're tired of listening to these people who call themselves right-wing but actually are not, then I would encourage you to go to thefogandwhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Right now, I go live at 8:15 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday and Wednesday. I would like to eventually move towards doing this Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and eventually I would like to do this every day. But it's not going to happen if I don't have you guys supporting me. And I don't want to just come here, sit down, and talk to you about politics and history, but I want to educate you and inform you so that whenever you go about your daily life, you know how to fight back against the left. That's something that's been a dream my entire life. It's something that I've always wanted to do, is help people, help our people combat open borders and combat the endless wars. So that's the best way for you to support me, because it's going to take a movement for us to move the Republican Party rightward and turn it into the Christian values and America First party. It's not going to happen on its own. If you're waiting for Michael Whatley and Lara Trump to change that, you're going to be sorely disappointed. The only way they're going to change is if they're listening to you and I, if there's a groundswell, a movement against those people. What they want actually is to have the support, secure the support in perpetuity of their donors, the modern Rockefeller Republicans, the Elon Musks of the world, the corporatocracy. And that's not what our founders wanted. They were rich men, landowning men, but they were Christians, and they wanted to put America first, and that includes the common man. Andrew Jackson was probably the best president we ever had. You'll find that I'm an Andrew Jackson kind of conservative. And so I would encourage you that if you're tired of the same old of big con, and you want someone who's actually working to change the conservative movement, to change the Republican Party and move it rightward and fight against the Buckleyites and the like, you need to go and subscribe on Substack. That way I can do this full time. And also you'll get some good benefits. You will get the interviews that I conduct with guests before anyone else gets them. I go behind a paywall, talk to these guests. You get them as soon as I'm done. You'll get these episodes. And then about a week later, usually the public will get most of the interview, although there are certain parts of the interview, about 30 minutes to 45 minutes, stays behind a paywall. So you get exclusive content. You also, if you become a supporter on Substack, will get exclusive access to a group chat. It's the Fog and the Whirlwind supporters group chat. And so go over there, hop over there if you're tired of the norm, and support me. And I would really appreciate all your support. Make sure you're also, if you can't afford to support me financially, you can follow me on Twitter at Fog and Whirlwind, or X as we're calling it now, at Fog and Whirlwind. Instagram is also Fog and Whirlwind. And then on Gab as well, it's at Fog and Whirlwind. Thank you for your support again. Let's get back to the show. Okay. Thank you for hanging out with that commercial. This is going to be a headline from a quote about illegal immigration. Christian Owen says, news that 1.6 illegal immigrants have left is massive. Approximately 1.6 million people without legal immigration status have left the United States since the start of the Trump administration, according to Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem. In less than 200 days, 1.6 million illegal immigrants have left the United States population. This is massive, Trump said in a social media post thanking President Donald Trump. She added that the decrease would yield safer streets, reduced taxpayer spending, less burden on schools and hospitals, and improved job prospects for Americans. The figure comes from a report by the Center of Immigration Studies, CIS, a group that supports lower immigration levels but has acknowledged its estimate may overstate the decline. The Department of Homeland Security said the claim is based on CIS's analysis of data from the current population survey, administered by the Census Bureau and Bureau of Labor Statistics. The CPS, which is not Child Protective Services, it's Current Population Survey, collects information on birthplace and citizenship, but does not ask respondents about immigration status. CIS notes several caveats in its methodology. It said increased enforcement measures may have led to fewer immigrants responding to the survey, possibly exaggerating the apparent drop. The center also said its data on legal immigration through July 2025 is incomplete, adding further uncertainty to the estimate. But even if it's not 1.6 million people, even if it's not that many, it's still probably in the ballpark of 1 million people. Even if they're off by a factor of a third, that's 1 million people who have remigrated, people that have decided to either go home or go somewhere else. Not America, not staying here, we're going to get deported. So thank God for that. This is very good news. Glad to see that. Make sure you're coming in the live chat or coming on the video with your thoughts. All right, now, a big story before we close up with some stuff about Beto O'Rourke and just the idiot that he is. We have this headline, U.S. military deploying over 4,000 additional troops to waters around Latin America as part of Trump's counter-cartel mission. That is from CNN. But we have other sources backing it up. The Telegraph. Trump sends U.S. Army to fight Mexican drug cartels. Another U.S. military, this is on Reuters, deploying forces to southern Caribbean against drug groups. So we're going to be looking at that. And I really do want to hear your thoughts on, do you support this, yay or nay? I'll talk about it in a minute. The extraordinary move has threatened a diplomatic row with Claudia Sheinbaum, the Mexican Sheinbaum, I don't know, the Mexican president, issuing U.S. forces will not enter the country. The directive marks a significant escalation in the president's aggressive campaign against the Latin American cartels, which he has designated as foreign terrorist organizations. Pentagon officials have started looking at plans to target the group, sources told the New York Times. The move opens up the possibility of military operations at sea and on foreign soil against the criminal groups. It also raises legal concerns, such as whether killing criminal suspects outside an armed conflict zone would constitute murder. Responding to the developments, Ms. Sheinbaum said the United States is not going to come to Mexico with military forces. Well, Ms. Sheinbaum, we'll see, because it may be that you don't really have much of a say. We cooperate and collaborate, but there will be no invasion. That is ruled out. We have stated this in all the calls. Yeah, Mexico really cooperates and collaborates with the United States government. Sheinbaum sounds like an absolute idiot. Mr. Trump has been fixated on the idea of launching direct attacks on drug cartels since his first term, when he reportedly suggested firing missiles into Mexico to target the gangs. In April, he asked Ms. Sheinbaum to allow U.S. troops into the country to help fight the cartels. Mr. Sheinbaum, this is Mr. here, I think that was a misprint from Yahoo News. Sheinbaum rejected the proposal, telling Mr. Trump that countries could collaborate, but with you and your territory and us and ours. Mr. Trump said he had suggested the idea because the cartels are horrible people that have been killing people left and right and have made a fortune on selling drugs and destroying our people. Trump has already reinforced the southern border with National Guard troops in an effort to stop drugs such as fentanyl flowing into the country. Well, it's good that he's put National Guard down on the southern border. That needs to be happening. And as a result, we have results, right? Border crossings have gone down by something crazy like 92%. So to read a little bit of the Communist News Network, I will, I'll read it so you don't have to, right? Let's see if I can get this to load. I think I have it ready. Yeah. Natasha Bertrand wrote this on CNN. The U.S. military is deploying more than 4,000 Marines and sailors to the waters around Latin America and the Caribbean as part of a ramped-up effort to combat drug cartels, two defense officials told CNN. A dramatic show of force that will give the president a broad range of military options should he want to target drug cartels. So that's a little bit of that article. We also have this for Reuters, U.S. military deploying forces to southern Caribbean against drug groups. So that was, this is interesting. And what do I think? Probably a lot of you are thinking, okay, you've been reading about what's going on. You mentioned at the beginning of the show you don't like it. What do you think? This is back to the article by Reuters, and then I'll tell you my thoughts. The United States has ordered the deployment of air and naval forces to the southern Caribbean Sea to address threats from Latin American drug cartels. Three sources briefed on the decision told Reuters on Thursday. And as always, guys, these are going to be on Substack. So Substack is where I put my website, for those of you who are not that familiar with me. Go to thefogandwhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Again, that is thefogandwhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. It's where I put my sources. So what do I think? Do I support this? Well, you're against illegal immigration, and we know from listening to your show that you're actually opposed to legal immigration too. So it would follow then that you are for this because they're bringing drugs. They're bad people, most of them causing crime and other problems. And even if they're not causing crime, they're mooching off of welfare. So shouldn't you want these cartels busted up and defeated by United States military troops fighting against this cartel? I agree with Sheinbaum, but it's kind of right thing, wrong reason. I don't do this because she's most likely in the pocket of the cartels herself and doesn't want to see the people helping to line her pockets. She doesn't want to see those people destroyed. I oppose the United States military fighting against the cartels because it's not our fight. That's not our problem. And oftentimes people have great intentions, but there's always unintended consequences, are there not? That's the problem. Oh, we've got good intentions. We're going to fight, and we're going to go against Iraq and the weapons of mass destruction. And same for Iran. Good intentions on the one hand, but what was the result? Terrible. All the wars in the Middle East did was prop up our greatest ally, trademark pending. Did nothing for our interests. In fact, when we left and things got objectively worse, you have to ask yourself, what were we even there for? And unfortunately, there's too many Republicans on the right who are like, well, that's because Obama was president. Obama didn't do things good enough. Well, Obama was not president the whole time those troops were in there. Obama did not start that war. If you want to make this about political parties, who kicked off the war? Bush. Was everything great under Bush and everything was bad under Obama from a geopolitical and a military strategy standpoint? No. Bush did stupid stuff too, so did Obama. And it's not that Obama just got in and screwed it up. Those wars were not our fight. This should never have been fought. And so as a result, again, I will say, to look at the steelman position, I can understand a little bit better if we're going to send 6-foot blonde farm boys in our military to go fight in a desert. I understand going to fight in the Mexican desert more than I understand going to fight in some Middle Eastern desert. That makes less sense. To go fight in some thousands of miles away, that's not our problem. Versus going a couple thousand miles away on our southern border to fight against cartels because of them selling drugs that are bad for our people. I understand it more, but that doesn't mean I'm okay with it. I don't support that. What we need to do is highly militarize our southern border, and really we need a cultural movement in this country to put down drugs. People want to talk about gun control and stuff like that. We need to have an anti-porn and anti-abortion movement in this country and an anti-drug movement in this country, because that's the way you're going to have lasting results against drugs. Trying to get people to get help, taking them to rehab, so forth and so on. And also, Trump's talked about before, he talked about this whenever he was running for his second term. He talked about wanting to give drug dealers the death penalty. That's another thing that would help. It won't get rid of all of them, but it'll help some, right? So that should, to me, be on the table, I believe. So I oppose that because I don't want cartels selling poison to Americans, but I also don't want troops going down there, dying, and then unintended consequences. We fight and fight and fight. This turns into a quagmire. Then a Democrat gets in there and doesn't do things as well as Trump. Then a Republican gets in there and doesn't do things as well as Trump. And things just slowly get worse and worse and worse. And that's the thing, too. It's never, just little pinpricks, just little tiny military operations. It always leads to a bigger war. And if this Mexican president is saying this now, if we actually do it, if we actually continue to have troops in that area and or in Mexico and have some military operations in Mexico, it could lead to a war, a full-blown war with Mexico. And we beat Mexico last time in the Mexican-American War. We do not need the Mexican-American War 2.0. That would be disastrous for our economy and for our people. We don't need to be going and dying in a war against Mexico. Well, it's just against the cartels. But if the Mexicans are in the pocket of the cartel, they're going to protect the cartel. And there's going to be a big, bad, broad war. We don't need any of that. That's an important thing to note. Okay, for our final story of the day, we have here something about Beto O'Rourke. Before I even talk to you about Beto O'Rourke, I'm going to bring something on screen so you guys can watch. And this guy, I will tell you, I'm not his fan. I don't like him at all. I think he's one of the dumbest people in American politics right now. But he did an event recently, and just listen.
They're all bending the knee. And so this guy thinks, Donald Trump, that he's absolutely unstoppable. He really believes that he's the king that these knee benders tell him that he is. And so he comes to our state to grab even more power in the form of these 5 congressional districts, including Mark VC's right here. He thinks that we are going to take it right here, but he doesn't understand in Texas, our knees do not bend. That doesn't work here. We're going to fight these murders for as long as it takes with everything we've got. We're never giving in, we're never giving up, and we're never bending the knee. Are you with me? This guy and these Republicans are running scared. They're in full panic mode. That is why Greg Abbott is trying to remove these House Democrats from office. That's why he's threatening to charge them with second-degree felonies. That's why he's threatening to hunt them down with state troopers, now with Kash Patel, who was busy covering up for Donald Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, now sending the FBI to go try to find these folks in Illinois or wherever they may be right now. But listen, I don't think he understands what he's up against here in Texas. Not only is it the folks who are here right now, not only is it those 54 brave Democrats who broke quorum to deny them the numbers to redraw these maps, but it is everyday Texans in every single part of the state. And perhaps the last place that they'd expect to see us coming is Tarrant County, Texas, right here in Fort Worth. Well, Donald Trump, here we are. You have met your match. And we're going to fight him each and every day with everything that we've got.
Okay, that's enough of that. Sorry, I had myself muted. It's such a bizarre statement. Number one, the Republicans are running scared. Trump is running scared. Greg Abbott is running scared. Which is why they're deporting so many people. It's why border crossings are 92% down. And why they are boldly, powerfully trying to redistrict Texas to get 5 more Republicans in the House, right? That doesn't sound like the move of someone who's scared, Beto. I'm sorry, but you don't seem to understand the basic definition of words. What scared even means. What I hear when I hear you and see you get up and talk is you're scared. You have power. You have had power. And now you're scared because you know that the Democrats are losing some power and becoming an irrelevant party. Now, that being said, this guy is going to run in the future. He ran in 2020. He's probably going to run in 2028. He's posturing like he's going to. And he may con a lot of Democrats into thinking he is some anti-establishment populist. What are some of the things he's talking about? He's rambling about, oh, they're going to be charged with felonies. What is he talking about? There's a couple of articles I'm going to bring up on screen and read to you. Were Texas lawmakers' desertions funded? By Jim Herson. This is on Newsmax. Over 50 Democratic legislators recently fled their home state of Texas and took up temporary residence in the ultra-blue states of Illinois, New York, and Massachusetts. While the who, what, and why of their ill-advised departure continues to be hammered out, the how may be of particular importance to Texas and the country at large. Seemingly, the absconders may have received an assist in their runaway efforts from none other than George Soros, Beto O'Rourke, and possibly others. More than a mere political stunt, the Performance Act is a frontal assault on the legislative process and blatant mockery of our governmental system. These lawmakers swore an oath to serve the people. Needless to say, showing up for the job is a prerequisite. Leaving their posts and hiding out in various other states is a breach of their core obligations. They have one major goal in mind: to thwart a constitutionally mandated redrawing of a congressional map, which is necessitated by Texas's population growth and the societal values of the region. This quorum-impeding antic is racking up quite a bill. Private jets, luxury hotels, and logistical support for the runaway legislators have been costly. However, the tab is evidently being picked up by the Soros-backed Texas Majority PAC and O'Rourke-powered by People PAC. The involvement of Soros and O'Rourke is particularly concerning. Soros, through his various foundations, has poured millions into the left-wing causes over the past decades, causes that have eroded America's shared societal values. Are you saying, sir, that George Soros is pouring money into organizations that are influencing American politics? That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. O'Rourke goes on to say in the article, is a failed political candidate. He appears to be chasing fame and seeking relevance. His group reportedly has a $3.5 million war chest, much of which has seemingly been funneled into covering the legislative duckers' airfare, lodging, and possibly the $500 per day fines, which every lawmaker faces for dodging the legislative session. That's 1,000 in 2 days. That's 2,000 in 4 days. And they have so many millions of dollars that they're just like, we'll just miss. We'll have a fine and we'll just pay the fine. They're probably not paying the fine yet. They're probably going to have to eventually be compelled, legally enforced to pay the fine. But they're not that worried about it. They're going to continue to break the law. These people do not belong in their states. They belong in Texas. So that's one article that I wanted to read. I have another one for you that I will be reading to you. And this is the thing. This is not some Newsmax or right-wing conspiracy theory. No, the Attorney General, one of them, the Attorney General of Texas, has called for the arrest of Beto O'Rourke over fundraising for Democrats. Texas Attorney General, my screen went down for a second. Ken Paxton is calling on the courts to hold former U.S. Representative Beto O'Rourke in contempt after the Attorney General said O'Rourke defied a court order to stop fundraising for Democrats that fled the state to block a vote on redrawn congressional maps. Paxton is suing O'Rourke's Powered by the People political group last week for reportedly funding Democratic lawmakers that left the state. Lawmakers who leave the state while the chambers are in session can be fined $500 per day. In a release Tuesday, Paxton claimed O'Rourke violated the temporary restraining order at a rally in Fort Worth on Saturday when he told the crowd, "There are no refs in this game, F the rules." Given Robert Francis's vulgar disdain for the rule of law and immense personal wealth, imprisonment is absolutely necessary to persuade him to obey the lawful restraining order issued by the Toronto County Court. Unless you think this is the only source I have on this, again, these are going to be on Substack. Paxton seeks Beto O'Rourke's arrest over financial support of Texas Democrats. This is written by The Hill. So it's not just Fox. And again, this is not just some conspiracy theories of, the money went from O'Rourke and Soros to these Democrats that have left their state. No, here you have the Attorney General of Texas credibly saying these people need to either go to jail or face other legal consequences. So that's a very important thing to note. Wanted to present those facts to you, and I'm going to now, we've already had the monologue, we've already taken a look at the headlines, that's happened. Now is an important time where I look at the super chats. Do we have any? I'm going to wait just 2 minutes looking at super chats, and then I'm going to start wrapping the show up. There's an important thing. I mention this pretty regularly. People have to be held accountable. The left loves to posture and say, Republicans don't care about the rule of law. They elected a felon. The Democrats, the former vice president, Kamala Harris, when she was still Senator Harris, when she was a candidate for the Democrat Party's vice presidential slot, she actually may have even been running for president in 2020 when this happened. But for sure, when she was a vice presidential candidate with Joe Biden, she went to courts in America and bailed out BLM rioters, criminals. She took money and went there and bailed them out. So frankly, I don't want to hear it when it comes to, the Republicans are not the party of law and order. Well, the Democrats definitely aren't. They also prop up, support, and treat with kid gloves that evil organization Antifa, which is a joke. A bunch of weak, barista swilling, barista and coffee swilling college dropouts that, think that their idea of being a tough guy is the 360 no scope on Call of Duty. And then they get up, they come out, and again, I'm not bashing Call of Duty fans. A lot of Call of Duty fans are really cool people. But some of these people, their idea of being cool is to play Call of Duty all day or Fortnite. And they're part of Antifa. They're college professors in some cases, like that bizarre-looking one that Tucker Carlson interviewed a long time ago. And these people are a complete joke. And the only reason they're dangerous is because they collectivize. Ordinarily, one-on-one, if one of them were to smack one of us in the face, it would probably break their hand, and then we would wallop them like their dad. They would see us starting to walk up, and most of the time they would run. But then when they're in groups of 50 or 100, they feel like they're bigger and more powerful when there's only one or two of the more conservative or right-wing group in the area. They're going to gang up on them because they're like hyenas. They attack in groups and they go after someone that's out by themselves. In some cases, defenseless people like women and children. So, all right, I did not see any super chats. I'm looking at the comments and I don't see any comments either. It's about time to wrap up. I appreciate you guys very much. There's going to be a lot more of this, I will say. Not every week, but so definitely not every week, but a lot more of me going live. Then what I'll do is take the video, put it out on Substack for my paid supporters, for those of you who like to watch it. But never fear, you will get content. You will still be able to listen to. If you miss the live stream, you can listen to it. I'm going to put it on Spotify and other places as well. It's been a really good episode, 112. I thought a really good group of headlines we've looked at together. God bless you, everybody. Hope you have a great day, a great evening, good weekend. And I might upload somewhat irregularly. I know there's going to be some crazy stuff going on the next couple weekends. I'm definitely not going to be able to go live. But I will be able to make some pre-recorded content. So never fear. And again, I want to just say, God bless you. Thank you for watching and listening to The Fog and the Whirlwind. Do me a big favor and press the like button wherever you are watching or listening to this. Make sure you are subscribed and following as well. The best place for you to keep up with the work that I'm doing is to go to Substack. I like putting my work out there because they are very committed to freedom of speech. They're also user-friendly. Go to thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Again, that is thefogandthewhirlwind.substack.com/subscribe. Also, look in the description of this episode to find me on social media. The links and the handles are all there. Thanks again.